Welcome to Monterey County Pops Pros Teach. I'm Carl Christensen, the music director and conductor of Monterey County Pops. Our orchestra of fully professional musicians presents free concerts of pops and patriotic music throughout Monterey County. During the school year, we visit local schools and conduct clinics and workshops for student musicians in the afternoon. And in the evening, we perform together in a free concert for their community. We are committed to mentoring young musicians, and since we have not been able to visit schools since March, we have created this series of instrumental clinics. They will be broadcast once a week on Comcast Channel 24, and they will also be posted on our website, montereycountypops.org, along with downloadable exercises, tips, and other print material. Bienvenido a Monterey County Pops Pros Teach. Soy Carl Christensen, director musical de Monterey County Pops. Nuestra orquesta de músicos totalmente profesionales presenta conciertos gratuitos de música ligera y patriótica en todo el condado de Monterey. Durante el año escolar visitamos escuelas y realizamos clínicas y talleres para estudiantes músicos por la tarde, y por la noche presentamos un concierto conjunto para su comunidad. Para nosotros, la educación musical de jóvenes músicos es muy importante, y como no hemos podido visitar escuelas desde marzo, hemos creado esta serie de clínicas instrumentales. Se transmitirán una vez a la semana en el canal 24 de Comcast y también se publicarán en nuestro sitio web montereycountypops.org junto con ejercicios, consejos y otro material impreso descargable. And now please enjoy our electric bass episode presented by bassist Steve Uccello. Ahora disfruten de nuestro episodio del bajo eléctrico presentado por Steve Uccello.
This little intro song I just played is the famous tune Blackbird, made famous by the Beatles. And that is a bass version arranged by the great bass luminary Jaco Pastorius. I'm Steve Uccello. I'm a bass player. I've been playing for over 30 years in many musical situations. And I've played at the Monterey Jazz Festival numerous times as a featured soloist. And I've gotten to travel all over the country, even over to Italy a few times and play in many different musical situations. And my saying was always, you take care of your music, it'll take care of you. So I've been lucky enough to play with some of the best musicians on the planet and on upright bass, as well as this instrument, the electric bass. When I started bass, I actually was a guitar player, and but I owned a bass so that my friends could come and jam with me, and I had a jam room set up. And of course, if you own the bass, you're going to become the bass player. Before that, my first gig on bass was playing High School Musical of Grease in my high school, in the high school production. I must have been a sophomore in high school, and I didn't even own the bass, but the band needed a bass player. And so a guy loaned me his bass. I strung it around and played the whole show. And it was just really fun to play all those bass lines and kind of learn about the role of the bass. But generally, bass is one of those instruments, sometimes people say, you know, it chose them, they didn't choose the bass. And many, many famous bass players have stories similar to that. Maybe they wanted to play cello, but the orchestra needed a bass. Or they wanted to play piano, but the jazz ensemble already had 5 piano players and the bass was sitting in the corner and they saw no one was playing it. So it's maybe not the most flashy instrument that people are instantly hear, but it definitely has such a powerful impact in the band, and really a band isn't a band until the bass is added in there. The other saying is a chord isn't a chord until the bass player plays a note underneath it. So though we are not super out in front, it's like we are the axle, of the car, maybe not the, maple dashboard or the leather seats or the power windows, but we are the foundation the car is rolling on. So our job is to kind of roll out a big carpet for everybody to be able to roll around on and have fun. And so a little background on just the history of the bass. Invented by Leo Fender, 1951. First iteration of it called the precision bass or the P bass, and was really kind of the last sort of instrument to become electrified and allow music to kind of go up to that next level, the coming of rock and roll, where there was already electric guitar, drums were already, the technology had allowed drums to be at a higher volume, and the electric bass was kind of the last instrument to, so in a way the precision bass has really been responsible for a major change in music starting in the early 60s, late 50s. And let's see here. You'll see on my supplemental materials, the PDFs, there's a few resources. Damien Erskine's Bass Education Online, and Ariana Kapp, another great bass teacher. These are people who you can sign up for their courses and actually have personal contact with them. So definitely beyond this just small lesson, it's very good to have a weekly check-in, keep the rhythm going. Even if you feel like you're not practicing enough, weekly lessons and having someone hold you accountable is essential to your growth as a bass player and a musician. Also, there's Scott's Bass Lessons with a super big plethora, so you can check those links in my PDFs as well. There's some links also about which instruments to buy and kind of a good place to start that you can also refer to. The takeaway I'd give any young player to choose a new instrument would be you don't need anything too nice. Really, this is only the second electric bass I've had in my entire career, and in all the great people I've ever played with, no one's ever said how much did you pay for your instrument. So you, just anything you get your hands on, get your fingers on the strings is gonna get you off to a really good start. So don't worry too much about breaking the bank on your first instrument. I won't bother going through all the links on there. A few notable players. Jaco Pastorius is sort of famous for jazz fusion. He's known for giving the electric bass a voice in jazz. Is sort of his, what he did for the bass and for the music. There's stories of him tearing out the frets of his bass and making it into a fret, one of the first fretless basses people ever played. But I think Dave Gilmour of Pink Floyd might have played fretless bass before that, but there's so many different opinions in the history of that. But Jaco's a very notable player for kind of bringing the bass forward in the band and being a melodic instrument. It's not always what a bass player maybe will be called on to do, but as the music progresses and becomes more modern, the role of the bass is kind of also not really set yet. So there's a lot of players coming out. Les Claypool from Primus is another one who's brought the bass forward in the band. Victor Wooten of Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, known for extended techniques, slapping, tapping, if you're gonna... if you're gonna play the bass almost like a piano, tapping techniques. Again, these are kind of bass pioneers who are forging their own way. And then there's, the other kind of school of bass, which is very supportive, which is probably 99% of what most bass players do. And even these very famous bass players who can have all the fireworks and all the flashy stuff too, they're also rooted in being very solid fundamental bass players in any ensemble. So it's kind of our job too as the bass player to know what the role of the bass is, and most times it's the foundation of the band. So the things we want to do first and foremost are having a great tone, good rhythm, and knowing what the bass line is to the song. If you're going to play another great bass player, Paul McCartney, the Beatles, if you're going to play the song Come Together, if you don't play You know, it's just not going to be that song. And especially if a band like the Beatles, those parts that they played, you know, to a person who's steeped in rock and roll and who is very, you know, traditional in that, that's going to be like changing the notes to a Mozart symphony. You know, that bass line is come together from the Beatles. And so your role as that would be to lay down that supportive, strong bass line. Let's see, a couple other notable players. James Jamerson was first an upright bass player and then moved to electric bass. Most famous for Motown, R&B, any Aretha Franklin record, so many millions of bands that he was the bass player on, maybe even not credited, hundreds and hundreds of #1 hits. And he's definitely very artistic, but yet really supportive bass player. It's James Jamerson. And then going a little bit to the heavy metal side, obviously Metallica being one of the mainstays. Cliff Burton, their first bass player, was very well known and kind of a pioneer for metal bass, using distortion effects on the bass and even having some solo bass pieces within the band as well. So a few notable players to check out. There are millions more. So many bass players we'll never know the names of who are lending their, you know, foundation to so many bands. So those are a few of the famous ones. Okay, so the first thing about this instrument we're going to talk about is just the sheer physicality of it and building up your strength. To start, there's a famous saying by the great jazz educator and player Hal Gelpert that is, musicians are the athletes of the finer muscles. So first off, before we can really play any songs, we got to just kind of build up some strength. And even if you're already playing songs and you're kind of, you know, often rummaging on your instrument, you want to just definitely make sure your technique is kind of checks out, so you're not going to do yourself any harm as you play. When you're young, it's easy to get by and not have any pain, but as you get older, you want to play this instrument your whole life. Music is an outlet you can have forever. It's not like skiing or skateboarding, but good technique will ensure that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is just the main posture. The saying I have for students is, you play your instrument does not play you. So first you want to do is, you know, I may be sitting even wrong here, be on the edge of your seat, sit up straight. You want to be as ergonomic and natural as possible. So first, just don't even think about the instrument and just sit, you know, relax, straighten your back, and you're going to kind of lift your hand up to where it would be naturally without even thinking of playing, and then you want to sort of position the instrument to be in that general area. Everybody's going to find their own comfort zone, and so anything I say, you're going to adapt it to your own posture and your own, you know, physicality. But this is hopefully a good point A for everybody here. So I've got the instrument, my arm, I'm not going back, not going too forward. So this is the natural place where my wrist ends up when I just bend my elbow. And then the picking hand also is resting on this flange on the back of the body here. So we'll talk about the picking hand second and the fingering hand first. Some of you might have noticed I am holding the bass backwards. I'm a left-handed player. So most likely a lot of you will be playing this way. So I'll just refer to it as the fingering hand and the picking hand. So hopefully that'll be clear. And for you lefties, if you're playing out there, yes, definitely I would recommend getting a custom lefty instrument. As you notice, the bottom horn is short, the top horn is much longer. So when you're standing, you don't have any neck dive. When I first started to play the bass, I had a righty bass and I just strung it around, and every time I let go, it would just do this. So you definitely want to take the time, and now it's very easy to acquire a custom lefty instrument. So, and Sweetwater Sound, one of the sources I've listed here, also has custom lefty instruments. So the first thing we'll talk about with the, let's get my papers here, is just for techniques for the fingering hand and techniques for the picking hand. So the first thing I have is this thing I call the claw. So you always want to have your fingers curved. You never want to let the knuckles collapse. Same way as if you're standing for long periods of time, you don't want to lock your knees. You want to keep your knees bent. The same thing goes with your fingers. You always want to keep your fingers curved. So I've listed the rules of the claw in my PDFs. So the first one is the fingers are curved almost imagine if you're holding a soda can, and then you can turn that horizontal, and that's sort of your basic shape. The thumb generally will go behind the middle finger. And this is, like I mentioned before, you're going to find your own comfort zones. Maybe some people are a little more comfortable by the first, maybe even a little over. The shape of everyone's hand is unique. So these are general rules. So the thumb by the middle finger. And the third rule would be to, when you push the strings down with your finger, you don't want to push on the soft pad. You don't want to push on the very tip. You're going to kind of come in at a 45-degree angle. So you're going to be playing the note about right there. If your nails are too long, they might be touching the fingerboard. In fact, my fingernails are a little long today. I didn't have time to trim them. But so that's one thing you might want to consider if you're having trouble fretting the note and you're check the length of your nails. And then the last rule is the first finger is the only loner, which means that if I'm playing a note, I'll start up here on the 12th fret of the G string. So it'll be kind of where this exercise starts that I'm about to show you. So if I'm playing there with the first finger, I'm playing that note. There are no other fingers to help this first finger, so it's playing alone. And then if I go to put my second finger down, then all of a sudden now I have two fingers that are able to help push this string down. So you don't want to do is lift up any fingers and play with only one finger. You place the third finger down on the string, and now you have three fingers playing behind, two fingers behind and one finger playing the note. So three fingers are supporting the whole hand here. So you don't want to have this, right? So you want to have the ring finger is supported by the first and second fingers. And the same follows suit for the pinky. When you place the pinky down, all three fingers are going to be behind. So hence the saying, the first finger is the only loner. So if you had the first finger, if you're going to play this next note, the first finger is staying down. You're not lifting up like that. So it's all about, the saying is economy of motion. So same with the economy of money. If something costs $1, you pay $1. You don't spend more money than you need to because you're saving your money, you're conserving. So when it comes to the physicality of playing, you want to save your energy and not overdo it so that you can play for many years. If you have a long gig, you can play for many hours and not have any injuries or any fatigue. So those are kind of the four rules of the fretting hand. We call it the fretting hand here. I suppose if you have a fretless electric bass, you can still call it the fingering hand. So all these terms, if you're going to take up the bass, you're going to hear all these terms a lot. So I'm going to get into this exercise here I have called the spider finger exercise. But first we're going to talk about the picking hand a little bit. So I have the rules on the PDF. Kind of addressing first number one, saying there's two approaches to the thumb. Generally, on a 4-string electric bass, the way I was taught is you have your thumb resting on the pickup like this, and when you go to pick a note, the finger follows through, and then when you go to the next string, you're following through to the next string above it. So if you pick the A string, your finger is going into the low E string. If you're picking the D string, your fingers will come to rest on the A string, and so on with the G. Now, the observant student might have noticed as I pick the strings to the higher strings, I'm getting farther away from my thumb. So this is where this is 1B on the picking hand. There's another approach called the floating thumb approach, where you don't plant the thumb here, and every string you pick, your thumb will maybe either be kind of floating or resting on the next string it's playing. So that way you can maintain this shape and you just move the whole hand up and down to pick different strings. Not as crucial on a 4-string electric bass, but as music becomes modern and the instruments are changing, we're expected to play lower and lower notes, even higher and higher notes. So there are 5-string basses with low strings, 6-string basses. You have a low B string and a high C string. And as we get to those extended range basses, the floating thumb technique might be the best way for you to go. So you're not, if you have a 6-string bass and you're resting your thing, your hand's going to end up like this. You want to keep that nice curved shape there. So the last rule Number 4, striving for consistency between the first and second fingers. There's a lot of, you ask 10 bass players, you're going to get 10 different opinions. There's a school of thought that is you use one finger for everything you can, and only until you really need to play something fast can you then use the second finger. And the idea with that is there is a consistency you're going to have with one finger. So that's an approach you can take. My personal approach is I feel like it's better to strive for consistency between the two fingers. So if you can get that sound, so then that way you can, when you go to play something fast, you'll have the same technique as you had slow. Of course, there's many musical situations where you might break all these rules. So always keep in mind that these are all square one, just point A. You're gonna find some song where you're gonna need to do something different. And so we always are serving the song as the bass player, serving the ensemble. So if you need to break some of these rules, that's the name of the game. Okay, so now that we've heard the bass a little bit and we know a little bit of the background and some of the basic techniques and posture, I'm going to introduce you to this exercise. I'm sure I did not invent it, but I feel like, I don't remember where I learned about it from. So I call it the spider finger exercise. And the basic idea is, as I mentioned before, you need to be able to physically play this instrument to play any songs that you want to learn. So a lot of ways we do that are just technical exercises. Maybe just a quick word about building a practice routine. Right now I'm going to talk more about technical stuff and building up your technique, and maybe a little less about the music, but as a day-to-day, real practice routine should sort of consist of a few different parts, and it's not all going to be technical. You're going to have a warm-up at the beginning. You're going to start with something technical that's just going to get your fingers moving. Then you can go into something like doing scales or something else that's rudimentary. And then you want to move into playing some songs that you, maybe a song you know really well to kind of start out. And then maybe a song you're working on that you don't quite have down yet. And maybe at the end of your practice routine, you can just start learning something completely new that you haven't ever played before that you're going to start chipping away at. So in this way, you don't burn out. You don't want to only do technical stuff. At the same time, you don't want to only just learn songs. You want to sort of have a good combination of knowing repertoire and having good technical command of the instrument. So your practice routine should kind of reflect all those areas of music. So, and it's up to you. Every person's different how you build your practice routine. But just keep in mind that you want to, maybe start with something technical, go to something musical, that you're comfortable with, and maybe finish off with something you're just going to start learning. So this would be something I still to this day start with and use as a warm-up, the spider finger exercise. We're going to work on it at a few different levels, but the basic idea is you are, whenever you play any song or anything on the bass, it's going to be made up of notes, and you're going to play those notes with your fingers. And so the idea is whatever we're doing, we know we must have strength and coordination in our fingers and kind of play with at least some kind of technique that's going to allow us to say what we want to say on the instrument. So this is just kind of really starting out slow here, but as I said, this really can also be used as a speed building exercise for more advanced players, and it's also just a super thorough warm-up. I played a gig this morning, and before we kind of started sound checking, I was doing this to just get my fingers warmed up, so it's still very useful for any level. So basic idea, one finger per fret. A few terminology things. If you're looking at any kind of music or any tablature, there might be the numbers indicating which finger. Generally, thumb is T, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So your first finger, second finger, third finger, fourth finger. So I'll refer to those. Sometimes you index, middle, ring, and pinky could be used as well. The names of the strings, E, A, D, G, from the lowest string to the highest string. And you can use little sayings to help remember all these things. Eat at Dad's garage is the one I learned when I was first starting. So the E string, the A string, the D string, then the G string. And then of course the frets are these vertical wires. So first fret is there. This is the nut. When you play just an open string, the sound is beginning at the nut and coming here at the saddle. So this would be our first fret here, second fret, third fret, fourth, fifth, and so on to where you see these 2 dots, and that's our 12th fret. And this is our halfway point. You can do these things called harmonics there. That's the halfway point between the saddle and the nut. So, you know, when people say there's a lot of math in music, you know, dividing the string up into halves, thirds, quarters, fifths, you can divide that up and do harmonics on the bass. But just so you get to know sort of the geography of this fingerboard, think of it as you're moving to a new town and you need to explore. The strings are the streets and the frets are like the addresses of which, you know, place. Which finger are you going to use? Who's showing up at which address? So these things, the way we communicate, you need to become familiar with those terms. We can talk later, we're going to talk about learning the notes and traditional reading. Everything also has tablature. We can also just talk about the strings and the frets and the fingers. So you don't need to know the address. I can tell you, you know, which fret to play, maybe not the note. So there's a lot of ways to communicate the same thing. For now, I'll start with just calling it the frets. So we're going to start out at the 12th fret, the halfway point, indicated by the 2 dots. To get some visual, anything we can use to help us keep our place, use it. There's little dots here as well on the top of the neck. And there's 2 dots there for the 12th fret. You can notice that the frets become closer together. So in a way, the notes are easier to play the higher they are, and the more you go down the fingerboard, the notes spread apart a little bit and become a little harder to control. So we'll start up here on the 12th fret with the first finger, and we're going to kind of play that note. The first thing you want to strive for is getting a pure sustained note. Okay, you don't want to hear any no buzzes like that. If I go too far back from the fret I'm playing, it'll buzz. If I go too close to the fret I want to play on, it gets a little muffled. So you want to be just behind the fret. So you get that tone. You should kind of feel you're pressing hard enough. Maybe you can feel the string, the finger getting a little bit smooshed against the bone a little bit, but you don't want to squeeze too much. Again, the economy of motion is also, you know, we're saving our energy. You only want to push as hard as you need to get a clean sound. So you can do this as a way to start. Well, how hard do I need to press? Just touch the string lightly without even pressing a note and just begin to apply pressure slightly. And right about there. So I don't feel like I'm really pressing very hard on the string into the fretboard. If I wanted to push even harder, I could, but it's wasted energy. So you want to conserve that energy. And again, this avoids any problems. There are no muscles in your hand. There's tendons, but they are controlled by muscles in the wrist that pull the tendons. So it's a, you know, beautifully designed machine, but if you overdo it, definitely you can have problems later in life. So you want to only press down as hard as you need to. So the very first thing you want to do is get a great tone and sustain the note and just let it ring out until it decays away. So the first thing I'll have students do is hold the note out. And this is kind of like a meditation here, holding the note out until it's a long time. If you have your bass set up well and you're going through your amp, if you're playing acoustically, you can still hear it even then. So that's the first thing you want to do, is you want to just get a clean sound with no fret buzz, and you want that thing to be able to sustain. And in fact, though it seems like you're doing nothing, holding down that note for a long period of time, you actually are building strength with that. It's like holding a weight. If you held a weight completely out straight, you're going to feel it after a while, right? So you don't always have to be moving to be building strength. And always remember to breathe as well. Your muscles need oxygen. So then you would do this with all the fingers. We don't have time for this lesson to demonstrate how long I would actually take if I was doing this, but I'm putting down the second finger now on the 13th fret of the G string, okay? And now, what am I doing? I'm remembering my first, the rules of the claw. The first finger is the only loner. So now once I put the second finger down on the 13th fret, my first finger is staying there. Okay, so the same thing you want to do with no rhythm, relaxed and breathing. Playing that note, let it decay out. Again, same procedure with the third finger, with the other two fingers staying down behind it. And then the same thing with the pinky on the 15th fret. And it's nice that the pinky, being the smallest, kind of weakest finger, has all the other fingers behind it to help it out. So that's a definite advantage. So it kind of helps balance out that pinky. And actually, it does not take much weight to really push down the strings. So even though the pinky is your weakest finger, there's no real need to really kind of to pick on it and try to strengthen it all up. It's already strong enough to push these strings down. So that's our basic technique. You're doing long tones and you're going up, first finger, second finger, third finger, fourth finger. Now I've done this here on the G string on the 12th fret. So now what you want to do is be as thorough as possible, and you could do down all the strings. The lower strings are harder to control than the higher strings. So that's why I only start on the G string to get the fundamental idea of this. You know, what is our role? Foundational, supportive. We want to be clear and concise in what we're playing or saying. Well, how do you do that? Having a clear tone, no fret buzz. Being supportive kind of starts with having a great tone. So you want to really do not skip this step of getting the basic coordination and strength in your fingers. I'll add a little, some other permutations of this exercise here. We've just done one. It's almost infinite how many you can do. So I have in my materials, there's a little picture of an icon for an app, metronome app. Kind of looks like a little green circle called Pulse. There are many free metronome apps now. You don't have to pay a dime. I have this one, Pulse. Some of my students seem to like it, and it's just a little green circle, and you just push it. And so you get a little, the metronome's your best friend who will tell you the truth, even if you don't want to hear the truth. It's a great way to just keep a basic constant rhythm, and you know if you're falling off, the metronome is generally not going to lie about it. So after you've kind of gotten to where you can play all the strings and have long, clear tones with no rhythm, then we can add a little bit of rhythm to this. So let's just say we're going to hold one note down for 4 counts. And I'll just do this. We should always be ascending and then descending equally. Maybe for now I'll just do the ascending part just because this is a shorter lesson here. So I'll just start. I'll hold each note out for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then if you went down to all the strings, the D, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Okay, so that's, and you can, you know, see to play all the strings. You don't, I'm not going to demonstrate all those right now, but you should also do it on the A and the E strings as well. Then after you've done it maybe 4 counts each, you can do this any way you'd like. You can go for 8 counts, 16 counts each, and then get shorter and shorter and build up speed this way. And this is another side note to this is it does require some creativity on your part to come up with exercises using some of these parameters on your own. Just now I came up with one holding each note for 4 counts, and then I was all on the 12th fret. Maybe let's say I'll hold out each note for 2 counts, and then I will maybe descend down to the bigger spaced frets to the lower notes here. So I'm just gonna, off the top of my head, coming up with exercises that challenge us. Let's go for 2 counts each. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2. I'm going down 1 fret at a time. First finger, second finger, third finger, down a fret, and so on. And you could do that on all the strings until you come down to the lowest string on the lowest notes. If you descend, low notes up and then the higher notes down. So there's many variations you can do on this, and I definitely would recommend not trying to do everything in one, all in one day, every single note. So you could say something like, I'll do all the notes on the G string on Monday, all the notes on the D string on Tuesday, and so on. Don't wear yourself out. And then here's a little bit of how you can use it as a speed, increasing your speed. So right now we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's stay with that one for now, but I'll do 1 count per note, and then I will go down each fret for that. So if you're going to go, slowly increasing your speed until you go every fret, and then you're down here. You could also do 2 notes per count to increase your speed. You could even do 4 counts. And so on. I work on my precision there a little bit. I didn't warm up enough. But so you get the idea of how you can incrementally build up your speed. Yeah, and any bass player, no matter how long you play, you still need to always warm up and take your time to do that. Music is like having a conversation. You don't just know how to have a conversation, so you ignore who you're talking to. Every time you need to be present and be there, and just kind of live in every note you're playing. So even though I played for years, I still warm up every day. I do that spider finger exercise. Let's see here. Let's talk about just a little bit of another in the world of permutations of this now. We've sort of gone all 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's take any combination of these that we can think of. How about 1, 4, 2, 3? Just randomly a combination of notes. 1, 4, 2, 3. So that would be just one of many permutations. So maybe I'll do 2 notes per beat, and then I will do this combination of the spider finger exercise. Maybe this time I'll start on the low E string, just to kind of challenge myself here and warm up to those low notes. So the pattern we'll do is 1, 4, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Down a fret. The low strings are always the hardest to control. I'm trying to think about all the rules of the claw. Okay, so that's all the way down to that first fret there. So by building up in this way, you'll just find that you will, when you go then to play a song, you'll have all these little building blocks. Kind of think of all these notes are like, little bricks that you're going to use to build up your building, if you think of a song as a building. And also, we'll talk about scales too, which are also kind of, a big fundamental building block of music. But one more thing concerning the spider finger exercise. So obviously a technical exercise, strength building, speed building, but also happens to be used in a famous Led Zeppelin song called Dazed and Confused, if you're any classic rock fans out there. So if I take this 1 finger per fret exercise, and you go to the D string, and you use the 2nd fret, the 3rd fret, the 4th fret, and the 5th fret, and those 4 notes, and then the same 4 notes on the A string, and you combine that with playing 1 open low E string, you have this famous riff, which I think there's tabs for and music for on the corresponding materials of the classic rock tune. right? And then Jimmy Page does some harmonics there. But so that's a very famous tune that people love, and wouldn't you know it, it's just those 4 notes that are part of this boring technical strength building exercise. A lot of analogies for sports will work with music as well. So this would be the equivalent of, if you want to, for like strength building, conditioning, sit-ups, push-ups, lifting weights. You can't really go play out on the field, and if you can't run, you're not going to, most sports, soccer, football, you're going to need to have those building blocks. So take your time. Always make sure there's a method, using no rhythm first, making sure you're totally relaxed, adding slow rhythms, and then speeding things up and getting faster and faster. So then, like I said, always make sure to then have that be only part of your practice routine. You want to be musical as well. The last thing we'll talk about today is scales. So those, again, you could think of as the building blocks of music. Every song, every riff you'd want to learn in some way or another is going to probably use some part of a scale. So by learning scales and mastering all these positions and notes, you're actually kind of practicing little sections of every song there is. So by mastering scales, it just helps you'll learn songs way faster, and any technical challenge in music often is going to be part of some little scale. And by practicing that, we will have those building blocks to build our house or play a song. So the first one I just want to introduce you to is a C major scale. And there's materials there with tablature as well as standard notation. I definitely recommend, if you're in a school band, you're going to need to learn standard notation. Some teachers may tab something out for you, but generally in a larger band, there's not a lot of time for those kind of things. So couple just quick sayings on the bass clef. You'll notice there are lines and spaces. The saying I like for the lines is, good burritos don't fall apart. And the sayings for the spaces are A, C, E, G, all cows eat grass. So just a couple quick references there. If you see a note on the bottom line, that's going to be a G, good burritos don't fall apart. So there are also some materials there for the basics of reading, but just really quick, the C major scale. So it's going to start on the note C, and I also would recommend learning the notes names that are sharps or flats. There are 2 diagrams included, one with every single note named with sharps and every single note named with flats. So more explanation in the PDFs of what sharps and flats do and what the symbols are. But let's just start with this C major scale for now to give you an idea of a major scale. So we'll start with our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the A string. And again, starting with our long tones. 3rd fret of the A string, middle finger. Then the pinky on the 5th fret of the A string. Going to the D string, the 2nd fret with the 1st finger. Next note, 3rd fret with the 2nd finger. Next note, using the pinky on the 5th fret of the D string. Now the last 3 notes, we're going up to the G string. 2nd fret of the G, 4th fret of the G, this time the 3rd finger. Then the pinky finishes it off on the 5th fret there of the high G string. And again, we can do the descending. 5th fret, 4th fret, 2nd, 5th, 3rd, 2nd, 5th, 3rd. I started this scale with my middle finger, and that's a standard electric bass fingering, which follows the 1 fret per finger rule as well. You can also adopt a little bit of an easier fingering that is rooted in upright bass system, which I know my friend Stan Poplin will probably refer to, starting the scale with the 1st finger as well. So we can also utilize upright bass fingerings on the electric bass as well, and it saves us spreading out too far. You can be in a little bit. So that would be just the same fingerings as I laid out before, except you're starting with the 1st finger on C. And that gives it a little bit of relief to not splay out so much. Both ways are good to have under your belt though. That's starting with the first finger. So there's just a major scale, C major scale. If you play the major scale starting from the top down, famous Christmas song, Joy to the World. So there's another kind of example of a scale is actually straight up. That's just the melody to Joy to the World. So by practicing that scale, I actually practiced and I prepared a little bit for my next Christmas concert. But, well, thank you so much for your attention and time, and I wish you luck with your journey with the bass. You take care of your music. It'll take care of you. I'm Steve Uccello, and thank you so much.